What if the greatest detective in history didn't start out brilliant? What if the mind of Sherlock Holmes was shaped by trauma, mistakes, and a series of mysteries that almost destroyed him before he ever became the legend we know? That's exactly what Young Sherlock Episode 1 explores. The series premiere throws us into a darker origin story, one involving prison fights, secret societies at Oxford, a stolen Chinese scroll, a terrorist bombing, and the very first meeting between Sherlock Holmes and his future nemesis, James Moriarty. But if you look closely, the episode is packed with hidden clues, subtle foreshadowing, and production details that hint at a much bigger conspiracy behind the scenes. So today, we're breaking down every scene, every clue, and every hidden detail in Young Sherlock Episode 1. Let's dive in. The episode opens in one of the darkest places imaginable, Newgate Prison in London. Here we meet Sherlock Holmes, played by Hero Fiennes-Tiffin, looking exhausted, beaten, and completely defeated. And almost immediately, the show tells us why. Sherlock is haunted by the memory of the worst day of his life, the day his younger sister Beatrice Holmes disappeared and was later found dead. His parents, Cordelia Holmes and Silas Holmes, desperately search for Beatrice before the devastating discovery. This moment clearly shapes Sherlock's psyche. It's the emotional trauma that sits at the center of the entire story. But the show's cinematography also plays an interesting role here. The camera work during these sequences is extremely fast and stylized, almost disorienting. Some critics have even described it as jarring or nauseating. But that chaotic style might actually be intentional, because the camera movement mirrors Sherlock's mental state, unstable, overwhelmed, and constantly jumping between memories. Back in the present, Sherlock gets into a violent fight with another inmate named Barney. And during conversations in the prison, we learn something unexpected. Sherlock didn't land here because of a major crime. He was arrested after a pickpocketing incident that escalated into a confrontation with a judge. So already, this version of Sherlock is very different from the genius detective we know. He's reckless, angry, and constantly getting into trouble. Just when it seems like Sherlock's life has hit rock bottom, someone important arrives. Enter Mycroft Holmes, Sherlock's older brother. Played by Max Irons, Mycroft immediately contrasts Sherlock in every way. He's calm, controlled, respectable. Where Sherlock is chaos, Mycroft represents order. Mycroft has come with a solution. He's arranged for Sherlock to attend Oxford University. But this conversation reveals something deeper about their relationship. Mycroft lives a predictable and stable life within the British civil service. Sherlock, on the other hand, is what Mycroft calls tedious. Not because he's boring, but because Sherlock's unpredictability constantly creates problems. However, Mycroft also drops a fascinating piece of world building. He tried to enroll Sherlock in some of Oxford's oldest colleges: University College, founded in 1249, Balliol College, founded in 1263, Merton College, founded in 1264. But every one of these prestigious institutions refused Sherlock, which forces Mycroft to settle for a much newer college founded in 1458, and Mycroft dismisses it as clumsy modernity. Even here, the show subtly reinforces Oxford's rigid class hierarchy. But before leaving London, Sherlock makes one very important stop. Sherlock and Mycroft visit their mother, Cordelia Holmes. Since Beatrice's death, Cordelia has suffered a severe mental breakdown and now lives in a specialized care facility. But during their conversation, she reveals something extremely strange. She insists that they are listening, and then she mentions someone terrifying, a man with a bird claw, and she says he's coming back for her. Now, this moment is incredibly important because it works on two possible levels. It could simply be a sign of Cordelia's paranoia and deteriorating mental state, or it could be a plot seed for a larger mystery, a mysterious figure tied to the Holmes family's past. Sherlock also tells her that their father, Silas Holmes, is currently in Vienna. Before they leave, Cordelia asks Sherlock to promise something: stay out of trouble, make his life better. And Sherlock agrees. which becomes a powerful motivation for everything he does later in the episode. Sherlock finally arrives at Oxford, but his excitement quickly disappears when he meets Smudger, the college's head porter, because Macroft didn't actually enroll Sherlock as a student. Instead, Sherlock has been hired as a scout. In Oxford terminology, a scout is essentially a servant, someone who cleans rooms, runs errands, and yes, cleans the toilets. Smudger even bluntly tells Sherlock he'll be cleaning the shitters. Sherlock is given a physical symbol of his status, a servant's apron. This is Macroft's way of controlling Sherlock. He wants him to work his way up, stay disciplined, and most importantly, stay under watch. But while Sherlock adjusts to this humiliating position, something far more dangerous is happening on the road to Oxford. A carriage carrying Princess Gulan Shoan and her attendant Chen is suddenly ambushed. The attackers are after something extremely valuable, a Chinese scroll. They plan to steal it and kidnap the princess for ransom. But they severely underestimate their target. Princess fighting attackers. The princess turns out to be an incredibly skilled fighter. Using hand-to-hand combat and stolen firearms, she eliminates nearly every attacker. Unfortunately, her attendant Chen is shot and killed during the ambush. But the princess retrieves the scroll and continues her journey to Oxford. And this scroll becomes the episode's MacGuffin, the central object that drives the entire mystery. At Oxford, Sherlock meets Professor Charles Thompson, a specialist in something called intellectual arithmetic. Sherlock quickly gets himself into trouble. He's caught snooping through the professor's files, and later interrupts a lecture to correct Thompson's calculations. But behind the scenes, something even more interesting is happening. Thompson receives a government letter identifying him as one of the 4 apostles. He locks the document in a safe. Now this is clearly an Easter egg hinting at a secret group inside Oxford, possibly political, possibly academic, possibly something much bigger. And this might connect to the deeper conspiracy the show is building. Meanwhile, Sherlock encounters the princess, and this moment reveals another hidden skill. Sherlock suddenly speaks perfect Mandarin. When asked how he learned it, Sherlock explains he once worked for a shoemaker in Whitechapel from Dunhuang. This small detail reveals Sherlock's unusual upbringing. He didn't learn through formal education. He learned from real people and real experiences. While solving a difficult math problem left on the blackboard, Sherlock is approached by someone important, James Moriarty. Yes, that Moriarty. But here, the relationship begins very differently from what fans might expect. Instead of enemies, they start as allies. Moriarty immediately deduces something shocking. Sherlock has already pickpocketed a watch from Bucephalus Hodge, a wealthy university donor. But instead of exposing him, Moriarty befriends him and invites Sherlock to a student party. At the party, a student named Peregrine challenges Sherlock. Sherlock performs his first classic Holmes-style deduction. He analyzes Peregrine's appearance and behavior, revealing several embarrassing secrets about his life. Did you catch this? This is essentially the prototype version of the famous Sherlock deduction scenes we know from later adaptations. But instead of admiration, Peregrine responds with violence, and the party erupts into a full brawl. After the chaos, Sherlock and Moriarty retreat to the library. Sherlock reveals the mysterious scroll connected to the princess. It turns out to be the Art of War, but this version appears to be extremely rare and valuable. Moriarty immediately suggests stealing it and selling it, which tells us something important about Moriarty's character. Even at this early stage, he's already morally flexible. Sherlock refuses. Instead, he ensures the scroll is safely locked away. During this moment, the show uses a visual sequence showing Sherlock's thoughts racing. However, critics have called this overactive imagination visualization a bit lame compared to other Sherlock adaptations. Still, it shows the writers experimenting with ways to display Sherlock's thinking. The next morning, disaster strikes. The library has been robbed, and Sherlock Holmes is the prime suspect. Constable Lestrade arrives to arrest Sherlock, but Mycroft intervenes. Using his influence within the Foreign Office, Mycroft delays the arrest. Sherlock now has time to investigate. Examining the library, Sherlock spots something unusual, a hole in the window and a hook, suggesting someone entered in a very unconventional way. Soon, Sherlock, Moriarty, and the princess track a suspicious carriage. One wheel is wobbling like a drunk man walking. They follow it all the way to Candlin College's boat launch. The trail leads Sherlock and Moriarty to a local bar and eventually a nearby barn. There, they confront a man carrying a bag identical to the scroll case. A brutal fight breaks out. Moriarty knocks the man unconscious, but when Sherlock opens the case, it's empty. This entire situation was a trap. The man was a decoy meant to lure them away from the university. And then Sherlock notices something crucial. The library window wasn't broken from the outside. It had been pushed outward from the inside first, which means the robbery was staged. This was an inside job. Sherlock quickly identifies the real suspect, Walker, the porter. Back in the library, they find the scroll hidden inside a tipped-over statue. But Sherlock suddenly realizes something terrifying. The scroll theft was never the real objective. It was a distraction. Someone needed the library cleared, so they could move a cabinet containing explosives through secret corridors connecting to the new science building. And the bomb is set to explode during the grand opening gala hosted by Bucephalus Hodge. Sherlock and Moriarty now have 90 seconds. They smash through a wall to warn the guests. Everyone evacuates just 30 seconds before the building explodes. After the chaos, Sherlock tends to Sherlock's injuries. For a brief moment, things finally feel calm. Sherlock even dreams of his sister Beatrice again. But when he wakes up, the police are waiting. Professor Charles Thompson has been found stabbed in the back, and Sherlock Holmes is the prime suspect. The episode ends with Sherlock being arrested, which raises a massive question. Is someone framing him? And could the mastermind behind the scroll theft, the bombing, and the murder be the same person? Young Sherlock Episode 1 ends on a shocking cliffhanger. But it also quietly plants several long-term mysteries. Who is the man with the bird claw? What exactly are the four apostles? And most importantly, who is the mastermind manipulating everything from the shadows? Because if Sherlock is being framed, then someone out there is playing a much bigger game, and Sherlock Holmes has only just entered the board. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on upcoming episode breakdowns and hidden details. Catch you in the next one.